He cheated, so I married a billionaire in Europe instead. Act 1. The ultimate betrayal. You ever have one of those moments where your entire life replays in your head, like a bad movie montage? Where every dumb decision, every ignored red flag, every he didn't mean it like that excuse crashes into you at once. Yeah, that was me, standing in the middle of the Kappa Phi Beta house, the air thick with cheap beer and bad decisions, watching my on-again off-again mistake of a boyfriend, Ethan Hayes, kiss Melanie Harper like she was oxygen, and he had been drowning. For 2 full minutes. I know because I counted. Now, I don't know if you've ever watched someone you thought you loved kiss someone else, but let me tell you, 2 minutes is a hell of a long time. It's long enough to notice the way he tilted his head, the way he always did with me, like he had it down to muscle memory. It's long enough to hear the gasps and whispers ripple through the room like an incoming storm. It's long enough to feel the blood drain from my face, leaving behind only a strange, icy numbness. But mostly, it's long enough to realize I had been a complete, absolute idiot. Before we continue, please like and subscribe. Let's rewind. My name is Nora Sinclair, grad student, chocolate souffle enthusiast, card-carrying hopeless romantic, and apparently, a world-class fool. Ethan and I had been playing this exhausting, will they, won't they game since freshman year. He was that guy, the one with the lazy grin and the 2 charming eyes, the kind of confidence that made you want to believe every lie he told. The kind of boy who kissed you like you were the center of his universe one night and forgot your anniversary the next. This latest round of our Cold War? It had started exactly because of that, our anniversary. 4 years. 4 years of history, fights, makeups, and second chances that never should have been given. And he had forgotten. No text. No flowers. Not even a damn emoji. I had waited all day, my pride a heavy anchor keeping me from reaching out first. Maybe this time, I had thought, maybe this time, he'd realize I was worth the effort. Instead, he had taken a shot of tequila, pulled a truth or dare slip, and when fate handed him a golden opportunity to make things right, he had smirked and said, "Too bad, Nora. I think I've kissed you enough." And then he turned to Melanie Harper. Melanie, the girl who had been in love with him since forever. Melanie, who was gorgeous in that effortlessly beautiful way that made you want to hate her, but you just couldn't. Melanie, who wasn't me. The party blurred. The music faded into an irritating hum. The lights, too bright, too loud, felt like they were swallowing me whole. I should have screamed. I should have thrown my drink in his face. I should have done something. But I just stood there, watching, as the boy I had wasted years loving proved, once, and for all, that he had never been worth it. The worst part, it wasn't some sloppy, drunken, spur-of-the-moment mistake. No, he kissed her like he meant it, like she was his, like I never had been. And something inside me snapped. Not in a dramatic, glass-shattering, curse-hurling way. Not in the way I had imagined during every late-night overthinking session where I fantasized about storming away from Ethan Hayes with my dignity intact. No. This was quieter, colder, final. I had spent years waiting for Ethan to grow up, to see me the way I had always seen him. But in this moment, I knew, he never would. I wasn't the one for him. I was the girl he knew would always be there. And I was done. I barely registered Lily, my best friend, appearing at my side. Her grip on my arm was tight, her body already tense like she was prepared to launch herself at Ethan and claw his face off. "Nora," she hissed. "Say the word and I will go full WWE on his ass." I almost smiled. Almost. But I was too busy making a decision. I refused to let this be my story. Because if I stayed, if I let him pull me aside with those puppy dog eyes, and the same tired excuses, if I let myself believe his inevitable half-hearted apology, I knew exactly how this would end. He'd charm me, like always. I'd forgive him like always. And he'd break my heart, like always. Not this time. I inhaled, steadying myself. Then, in the single most reckless, dramatic, insanely out-of-character move of my life, I pulled out my phone. Found the email buried in my inbox. An old, half-serious proposal from my family about an arranged engagement with some business associate's son. A deal I had laughed off at the time. I hit reply fine. I'm in. Before I could talk myself out of it, I found another email, the one about the international study program in Bella Vista, the one I had saved, but never applied for because Ethan was here, and what if things worked out? I filled out the application in less than 10 minutes. Then, I walked out of that party, out of that toxic cycle, out of Ethan's orbit. By the time he realized what he had done, it was already too late. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for him to decide I was enough. I was already gone. Act 2, a fresh start with a plot twist. Bella Vista was like something out of a dream. Cobblestone streets wound through centuries-old buildings draped in ivy. Cafe terraces spilled onto sidewalks, filled with the hum of conversation and the rich aroma of espresso. The kind of place where time slowed, where the air itself seemed to hum with possibility, including, apparently, me getting engaged to a man I barely knew. A month ago, I had been at a frat party, watching my ex-boyfriend make out with someone else like I didn't exist. Now, I was in Italy, sipping an Aperol Spritz, engaged to Gabriel Laurent, a man who looked like he had stepped straight out of a billionaire romance novel. It was almost funny. Gabriel Laurent, 29, intimidatingly poised, absurdly symmetrical in the way that made you think God really did have favorites, and as my best friend Lily so eloquently put it, definitely the brooding billionaire type. I hadn't expected much from this arrangement. My family was old money, and things like strategic engagements were just another Tuesday for them. The deal had been simple: Gabriel and I would shake hands, take a few staged photos, and go our separate ways, our engagement existing only on paper. At least, that's what I thought. Gabriel had other plans. We met for dinner at a quiet, candlelit restaurant on my second night in Bella Vista. I had expected formality, a handshake, maybe even a stiff, polite script rehearsed from years of high society functions. Instead, Gabriel studied me with an intensity that made my stomach flip. "You don't seem particularly concerned about this engagement," he observed, his voice smooth, laced with an accent I couldn't quite place. I shrugged, twirling my fork in my pasta. "That's because it's not real." His dark eyes flickered with something unreadable. "It's real to me." I almost choked on my ravioli. He wasn't joking. As I struggled to form a response, he leaned back in his chair, watching me like he was waiting for me to understand something important. "You don't remember me, do you?" The question threw me. "Should I?" He exhaled, something between amusement and exasperation flickering across his face. "We met once, years ago, a fundraiser in New York. You were 18. I was 24. I frowned, sifting through hazy memories of overpriced champagne and stiff introductions. "Nothing? You had a black dress," he continued, his voice softer now. "And you spent the entire evening sneaking pastries from the dessert table, because, in your words, these rich people dinners never serve enough carbs." I blinked. That sounded like something I would say. A slow smirk tugged at his lips. I was going to introduce myself that night, but then he showed up. My stomach twisted. "He?" His gaze sharpened. "Ethan Hayes." I stiffened at the name. "You were so in love with him," Gabriel said simply, like he was stating a fact. "And I knew, no matter what I said, you wouldn't have heard me." He crept up my neck. "That's ridiculous, is it?" He tilted his head. "I watched you from a distance for years, Nora. Not in a creepy way," he added when my eyes widened slightly. "Patiently. Because I knew eventually you'd realize what I did a long time ago." I swallowed. "And what's that?" His fingers traced the rim of his wine glass, his expression unreadable. "That you deserved better than him." A strange, unfamiliar silence stretched between us. I didn't know how to respond, because deep down, a part of me had always known Ethan wasn't good for me. But hearing it from someone who had apparently been watching me wait for Ethan to change, that was something else entirely. So, we agreed to keep things simple. A quiet engagement. No pressure. No expectations. Just an understanding that we were in this together. That was the plan. Ethan Hayes did not take being left behind well. I should have known. The boy had always treated my love like an all-you-can-eat buffet, sampling, indulging, walking away when it suited him, only to return when he was hungry again. But I had shut down the restaurant. Apparently that hadn't gone over well. 3 months into my Bella Vista escape, life was good. Great even. I was happily drinking cappuccinos at my favorite cafe, spending my mornings getting lost in art history lectures, and my evenings trying to decipher Gabriel's mysterious smirks. Speaking of Gabriel, he was a problem. Not in a bad way. No, in the infuriating, how is one man this unfairly attractive and also knows a kind of way? He had this way of looking at me, like he knew things I didn't, like he was waiting for me to catch up. And for the first time in years, I was beginning to feel something unfamiliar. Something terrifying. Something real. Then, one crisp November afternoon, as I sat in my dorm room, wrapping up an assignment, I heard it. A voice. A familiar voice. "Nora. Nora Sinclair." I froze. No. No, no, no. I rushed to my window, heart hammering in disbelief. And there he was, Ethan Hayes, standing in the middle of the street like some kind of deranged movie protagonist, slightly disheveled, possibly drunk, and very much not invited. He looked up at me, eyes wild. "You left me," he accused, as if this was the great tragedy of our time. I blinked. That was sort of the point. He ran a hand through his hair in that deliberately messy, tortured boy way he always used when he wanted sympathy. "I flew across the world for you, babe." Unfortunately for him, I was no longer babe. And unfortunately for him, Gabriel chose that exact moment to step outside. Dressed in a charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than Ethan's car, Gabriel walked onto the cafe terrace with the effortless confidence of a man who owned the entire street. Because, well, he probably did. He leaned against the railing, sipping his espresso, looking thoroughly unimpressed. "You're causing a scene." Ethan's head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing. "And you are?" Gabriel glanced at me, arching a brow. "You haven't told him." I sighed dramatically, resting my chin in my hand. Figured I'd let him embarrass himself first. Ethan scoffed. "Listen, man, I don't know who you think you are, but Gabriel Laurent," Gabriel interrupted smoothly, swirling his espresso cup with disrespectful elegance. "You may have heard of me." Ethan went still. I watched as his brain slowly caught up with the situation. Gabriel Laurent. He had heard the name. Because Gabriel wasn't just some random guy, he was old money. Real old money. The kind that made Ethan's family's upper-middle-class status look like pocket change. Ethan squared his shoulders. "So what? You think just because you have money, you can take my girl?" Gabriel didn't even blink. "She was never yours to begin with." Oof. I almost felt bad. Almost. Ethan's jaw clenched. "I love her." Gabriel exhaled, clearly unimpressed. "And yet, you let her walk away." He took another sip of espresso, eyeing Ethan like he was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. "Fascinating." Ethan bristled. "You think you're better than me?" Gabriel tilted his head, considering. "Yes." I had to bite my lip to keep from howling with laughter. "But Ethan?" Whoa, Ethan was fuming. "Let's settle this, then," he said, fists clenched. Man to man. Gabriel set down his espresso. "Are you challenging me to a duel?" "Not a duel, genius, a fight," Ethan snapped. "Unless you're scared." Gabriel studied him for a long moment. Then, with an infuriatingly calm expression, he said, "I used to fence competitively. I highly doubt you'd be a challenge." Ethan's eye twitched. It was beautiful. I half expected him to start throwing punches right there in the middle of the street. But Ethan was desperate now, grasping at straws. His gaze darted to me. "Nora loves me," he declared, voice raw with desperation. "Tell him, Nora." Silence. The entire street seemed to go still. Ethan's chest heaved, waiting, pleading for me to say something. For the old me to come back. For the girl who had spent years forgiving him to do it one more time. But she wasn't here anymore. I met his gaze, calm and steady, and with all the grace and dignity of a woman who had finally grown a backbone. I simply said, "Yeah, about that, I don't." Lily, who had been gleefully watching from the sidelines, absolutely lost it. She whipped out her phone, filming the whole thing with the kind of delight normally reserved for reality TV finales. Ethan went pale. For a second, I almost thought he might argue. Might try one last time to convince me. But then, he saw it. The way Gabriel looked at me. The way I let him. And finally, Ethan Hayes understood. He had lost me. For good. So he did what he did best. He stormed off. And honestly, it felt incredible. Act 4, the final showdown. I should have known Ethan wouldn't go quietly. Because of course it wasn't enough that I had left. It wasn't enough that I had moved on. It wasn't even enough that I was happier without him. No. Ethan Hayes needed a spectacle. And so, on the eve of my pre-wedding celebration, a glamorous affair set in a candlelit Bella Vista estate, with twinkling lights draped over olive trees, and the scent of fresh roses in the air, he crashed the party. Because of course he did. I was standing on the terrace, a glass of champagne in hand, when I heard the commotion. Gasps. Murmurs. A dramatic swell of music that was suspiciously well-timed. I turned, and there he was. Ethan stood in the middle of the grand garden entrance, flanked by an actual string quartet playing some over-the-top romantic melody. Behind him, fireworks lit up the night sky in dazzling bursts of gold. Whoa! My God! Gabriel, who had been standing beside me, sighed and took a deliberate sip of his whiskey. He does know this isn't a movie, right? I barely had time to answer before Ethan's voice rang through the night. "Nora!" Every guest turned. My mother, impeccably dressed and holding a flute of Prosecco, let out a weary sigh, Lily, standing off to the side with a plate full of tiramisu, immediately pulled out her phone. For content, obviously. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Ethan, what are you doing here? He strode toward me, eyes burning with a familiar desperation. I had to see you. Had to fight for you. His voice was raw, impassioned. The kind of performance he always used when he wanted to be forgiven. A younger version of me might have fallen for it, but that girl was gone. I love you, Nora, Ethan continued, his voice rising with each dramatic step. I've changed. I know I screwed up before, but I'm ready now. Ready to be the man you deserve. Lily muttered, oh, this is gonna be good. Then, with the entire room watching, Ethan pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and dropped to one knee. Nora Sinclair, he declared, voice trembling with obvious expectation, will you? Yeah. About that, Gabriel interrupted smoothly, still sipping his whiskey. Ethan faltered. Blinked. What? With the smuggest smirk I had ever seen, Gabriel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a very official-looking document. He unfolded it lazily, holding it up for Ethan, and, let's be honest, the entire party to see. It was our marriage certificate. Ethan's jaw dropped. Wait, you already married him? I smiled sweetly. Yeah, we kinda eloped last night. Silence. Pure, delicious silence. Ethan's face turned several shades of red. But I came all this way. Yeah, that was a choice, Lily called helpfully. Gabriel let out a dramatic sigh, tucking the certificate back into his pocket. You must be exhausted from all this effort, he said, his tone dripping with faux sympathy. Such a shame. Perhaps next time, you'll learn to value something before you lose it. I bit back a laugh. My husband, everyone. Ethan stood there, fists clenched, humiliation washing over him in real time. And then, without another word, he turned and stormed out. For good. Lily, bless her soul, absolutely filmed the entire thing. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Lily. Lily, girl, you dodged a bullet. Attached was a now viral video of Ethan's failed proposal. The internet had zero mercy. One user had captioned it, when your ex pulls a grand gesture, but forgets you already upgraded to a billionaire husband. Another, bro got humbled in 4K. I laughed. Because for the first time in forever, I wasn't just okay, I was happy. Bella Vista had become my home. My safe place. My fresh start. I spent my mornings wandering sun-drenched streets, getting lost in museums, falling in love with art and history and myself again. And Gabriel? Gabriel Laurent, my devastatingly handsome, infuriatingly smug, ridiculously thoughtful husband? He was the kind of man who left handwritten notes in my books, who memorized my coffee order, who kissed me like he actually meant it. One evening, as we stood on our terrace overlooking the glittering city, he wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. You look happy, he murmured. I turned, tilting my head up to meet his gaze. That's because I am. He smiled. Good. And then, he kissed me. Slow, deep, certain. As for Ethan, some mistakes you learn from, others, you leave behind in a viral video. And me? I was too busy falling in love with my future. The end.